The thought of an American president willingly taking orders from the Kremlin used to be something found only in farcical spy thrillers or lurid B-movies. Yet here we stand, on the threshold of a moment in which Donald Trump, self-proclaimed master negotiator turned slavish supplicant to Vladimir Putin, is almost certain, if not already conspiring, to direct American arms against the very nations that for generations counted on Washington as their security guarantor. Though he has not yet done it, the portents could scarcely be more ominous. The troop movements, the public threats, the squalid echoes of collusion. I can already perceive how this wretched plan is likely to culminate, not with a grand unveiling of some unstoppable juggernaut, but with a humiliating fiasco that will unmake Trump's regime and perhaps Putin's along with it. The stage is set by years of creeping alignment between the Trump coterie and Russia's autocrat, a partnership born of vanity and cynicism, now morphing into outright submission. As Trump shifts U.S. forces eastward, whispers abound of a plan to punish Europe if it dares mobilize against Putin's continued aggression in Ukraine. The notion that these allied democracies, France, Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states, could suddenly find themselves in the crosshairs of American troops is so obscene it nearly defies reason. Yet reason has been a casualty of Trump's second ascension to power from the start, as has every principle that once girded the transatlantic alliance. While he hasn't yet turned the U.S. military on NATO, he shows every sign that he will. Trump has raged at European leaders for their ingratitude and alleged warmongering in Ukraine. He has threatened to withhold defense cooperation and drawn up plans to move U.S. assets into the sphere of his favored puppet, Viktor Orban. He has repeatedly invoked the notion that America must be paid, or else it will not defend Europe. Those who have watched the slow-motion wreck of his foreign policy can see where this is heading: an ultimatum, followed by an edict to American forces, that they must threaten or even open fire on allied nations if they refuse to bend to Trump's dictates, or, more insidiously, to the demands of a gleeful Putin in Moscow. That moment, the very instant Trump issues the order, will make for the most gripping drama of our lifetimes. I predict with utter conviction that it is the spark that will detonate a moral cataclysm within the U.S. armed forces. Soldiers, sailors, airmen and marines who until now have attempted to remain apolitical in their service will suddenly face the unthinkable: instructions to treat as enemies the very democracies their fathers and grandfathers once died to save. It is precisely there in the hearts and minds of these servicemen and women that Trump's vile scheme will collapse. Far from forging a new American imperium or some transcontinental gangster pact with Russia, Trump will discover that he has instead lit the fuse to his own implosion. We have seen in smaller ways, though never on this massive scale, that men and women in uniform, when confronted with orders that violate the very core of their oath, can and often do resist. Can you envision tens of thousands of troops turning their rifles away from Europe and back toward the commander issuing the command? If you cannot, your imagination fails to account for history's many chapters of sudden, righteous insurrection. It is this inevitability, this great refusal, as I have previously called it, that Trump, ever blind to moral decency, underestimates at his peril. Thus, I foresee quite clearly that Trump's final assault on the transatlantic project will end not in Europe's capitulation, but in the downfall of the gangster duo itself. Putin, who has banked on Trump's ability to split and browbeat the West, will find that the alliance is made of sterner stuff than the easily flattered occupant of the Oval Office. As the American military rank and file recoil from Trump's obscene command, the logic of his presidency will collapse. And because Trump's loyalty to Putin is the very keystone of his foreign policy, once it shatters, the entire authoritarian edifice will crumble. Russia, too, will be dealt a blow, robbed of its American accomplice and humiliated before the eyes of the world. It is a perverse spectacle, yes, but also one that offers a glimmer of hope, the ultimate reaffirmation that certain lines cannot be crossed, that alliances born in the furnace of world wars cannot be so cheaply undone. Europe, ironically, will emerge from the crisis more united than it has been in decades, having discovered a steel in its spine that only existential threat can provoke. Meanwhile, the United States, shaken by this confrontation, will be forced to confront the mortal danger of allowing a single demagogue to twist its armed forces against centuries of shared ideals. Let us be under no illusion. This betrayal is not a wild fantasy or an overblown rumor. Trump himself has outlined his grudges often enough, and the Russians have scarcely hidden their glee. The entire sequence is as predictable as it is nauseating. But if there is consolation in all this, it is that the final act of this Trump-Putin alliance will be a catastrophic overreach that leads to its own demise. We stand on the brink of a historical inflection point, the likes of which we have not seen since the darkest days of the 20th century. And I, for one, am grimly certain how it will end. With Trump's order to attack Europe, the refusal of America's better angels to comply, and the collapse of a corrupt pact that was destined for ruin the moment it threatened the free world. And when that collapse comes, when the Western alliance breathes its sigh of relief, we may finally put to rest the toxic relics of this absurd liaison with Moscow. We shall also have learned, perhaps painfully, never again to entrust our highest offices to one who wields American power, but answers to the voice of a despot in the Kremlin. It is a prediction grounded in both horror and optimism. The horror that any occupant of the White House would so betray his country's founding ideals, and the optimism that the moral reflex of free people, be they in uniform or out, will yet rescue civilization from this looming debacle.